Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about running an indie studio beyond the first game. You know, most conversations around indie development focus on getting a game out the door. But what happens after that? Today, we're going to be digging into exactly what it actually takes to run a studio beyond the first release. Everything from the decisions, trade-offs, and even the mindset shifts that determine whether a studio grows or quietly fades out. Because building something that lasts requires thinking beyond game one. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, and we're back, and today with us I have Greg Lane. Greg, how's it going? And thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely, stoked to be here. It's going very, very well. We're on the precipice of announcing our next game, and so
Ooh.
actually by the time as we're recording this session, we haven't really posted the Steam page or anything about that yet. And as we go into June, the idea is we're going to do a whole bunch of launches. We've got an event scheduled. We've got a showcase we're on, and so a bunch of stuff. So it's like holding our breath, and then also like a duck, like trying to be smooth on the surface and paddle like crazy underneath.
Yes, don't break that water as you paddle downstream.
Yeah.
Well, I love it, the energy, and you know, as you know, Greg said, and we'll get into it in a second. You know, or you have this project and everything. But a few things about you. I mean, you are a game design faculty at Maryland Institute College of Art, which is really cool and awesome. But you're also owner and game developer at Tin Heart Interactive, and that's essentially what I know. You'll probably go more into detail and stuff, but where that project is living is essentially right as part of Tin Heart.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, it's a combination of things. Tin Heart is my studio. It's 100% mine. We do like educational games. We do like small narrative projects. That's the studio I hire interns through and stuff like that.
Nice.
That studio is co-owner also of Exit 73 Games, and that's alongside the animation team and our engineers. That's the team that made #Blood and stuff like that. And so there's 5 of us on that team. It's a pretty small team, and everybody's like a co-owner of that studio as well.
Okay, cool. So it's kind of this nice little collaborative environment then with these different studios and everything else, and then on top of that, you're giving back and bringing up the next generation of game developers.
Yeah, so I got into this totally on accident. I didn't know that, like, I thought games were only made in California or in Japan. And so being East Coast resident my whole life, I just presumed that like you got to go somewhere else to do it. And so I think that's also why I got into like games education, is because like if anybody can avoid all the pitfalls or take less time to get to where they can actually like be producing and building games, that's all the better. So yeah. Hopefully allow people to miss pitfalls and be more productive and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You see that in a lot of spaces too. Like another great comparison too is like the film industry. It's like it's either New York or LA. That's it, right? But the landscape has changed quite a bit. Those are still 2 ideal places to go. But I mean, you have other major cities and other outlets, and plus there's a lot you can do now when that barrier to entry has been lowered. So yeah, really cool stuff. So I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about Blood for a moment, if you could, and maybe some other things that you worked on and experiences such as.
Sure, absolutely. So #Blood is a vampire fighting adventure game. It is a single player, multi-platform release. So yeah, we shipped the same day on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch. We did a physical release of 4,000 copies on Switch, which we completely sold out of. We got published by Humble Games. So initially started as a Nights and Weekends project. Then we found a publisher, and then we got to release that like a year and a half ago. We did a couple of DLC updates to it. We keep flirting with the idea of like making a comic book based on it and stuff like that. So So that was a lot of fun to work on. That team is sticking together, and we're gonna announce our next game called Hank Shaw Animal Investigator, or Animal Detective, Animal Investigator. So see, that's how early it is. Like I haven't got my
Well,
like
yeah.
elevator pitched out yet of the title and everything. We had it as like this crime noir thing. We took it to MagFest kind of stealth in 2025. And it was like a mid-century detective, alcoholic, solving cases clumsily.
Lots of whiskey.
Yeah. And then we took a little while to step back and say, like, what else can we add to this, make it unique? And then we gave him this like Ace Ventura, Dr. Dolittle aspect, so he could like talk to animals and does all the animal investigations.
Nice.
So that's what it is. It's detective, crime, noir, animal investigation stuff.
I love it.
Yeah. Prior to that, I worked at Unity for like a year and a half, helping new developers learn how to make games. I was a community manager at Big Huge Games for like 4 years, working on the mobile game Dominations. I started full time in games as a junior game developer in like the Flash game era, and that studio was in New York. And then before that, like I did paper pencil role play testing for Margaret Weiss just to like learn how the mechanics of games works and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So lots of cool things going on, and I mean experiences and everything else that kind of like bring you to where you're at now. Just out of curiosity, I mean, you're doing a lot. There's like 2 different studios. You're a faculty member at Maryland Institute. Like, what do you do in your spare time if you or to try to unplug a little bit?
So I'm raising twins, and so we like just run around the house all the time. It's just running.
Yes.
They got a laser tag set recently, so that's the thing that we do just outside. I also like to cook. I think that's got a lot of fun challenges. And so, it's there's not a stop point. Sleep is the only thing I don't do. That's like the one thing that's really kind of missing out of that birth play.
That's so funny and true because I can relate in a lot of ways. Out of curiosity, what's your specialty? You say you like to cook. Is there one thing you gravitate towards the most, or love making the most, or does it matter?
No, not in particular. I like trying new recipes. I like combining stuff. Yeah, happy to try it all.
I love it. All right. Thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. But before we get into our conversation, we would like to get to know you a little bit more. And how we do that, folks, here is have a Q-Box round, which consists of a few random questions I prepared here today for Greg. So, Greg, are you ready for the Q-Box round?
All set. Let's do it.
All right. First one is, what advice would you give to someone else that's just starting out?
Good luck. No, you can do it. So I've always defaulted to the phrase of game design is the Renaissance art of this generation. It encompasses coding, it encompasses video, it encompasses audio, it encompasses storytelling. If you ever feel stuck or frustrated on like a single discipline, switch gears, switch to something else. Like incorporate all of your craft into what you're doing. Because I've always found games is just like an endless well of time. And so if you ever feel like you're like hit your initial skill limit or your initial interest limit, then just pivot gears and continue to work in a new aspect, and you'll be surprised at what you can actually put together.
I absolutely love that. It makes so much sense. Next is, what was your childhood favorite game?
So I often will say Journey to Silius. Because that feels like that gives me cred. It's a Nintendo game that came out in 1990. It was supposed to be a Terminator title, but they lost the licensing, and so they just changed some of the visual elements and then released the game anyhow. The soundtrack is killer. It's just like it's like a Mega Man type. Roll the right, shoot the guns, get different upgrades. But my grandmother bought it for me, and we were like at a swap meet or something like that. So the story of where it came from, that my grandma got it for me, is more important than the game itself in a lot of respects.
I can relate to that. I just have to I can relate a lot to that type of experience because like for me, like I love Chrono Trigger, big fan. But what I remember about, like, I remember a lot about the game itself, right? And there's a lot of good reasons for that in general. But one of the key things for me that was so memorable about it was I loved the game so much. I saved up all my money. And at that time, because it was actually popular, they jacked the price up from $60 to $80. And this is like,
Yeah.
that was a while ago.
Yeah.
And we're talking about $70 games being a lot now, right? And I was devastated. And my grandfather took me and he saw my face and then he looked and then he just pulled out of his wallet an extra 20. He goes, go get it. And I'll never forget that, So, but anyways, I love those types of experiences, especially as they relate to games and stuff. They carry so much more weight than just simply the games themselves. So I love that you shared that.
Did you have a game? Did you have a game that you played like with your siblings or your parents or anybody else? We had this game called Freddy Farkas Frontier Pharmacist. It was a Sierra point-and-click adventure game, and it was on the family computer, and we like collectively played that game as the whole family.
For me, the only one I can think of. I mean, there's definitely some titles and stuff, but the only one that comes to mind, which isn't quite a co-op environment, was for Game Boy Kirby's Adventure Pinball.
Okay.
And my sister and I were like always back and forth trying to beat the other person's score. And then and I love sharing this story. And to this day, I still have the highest score because she beat me one time. And I was like, there's no way you're going to keep this. And I just went to town for like, I don't know, probably weeks. And then I destroyed her. And then she tried several times and then couldn't. So
nice.
Anyway.
Well, congrats on the win. Yeah.
Well, speaking of things and speaking of games, which ones are you playing now?
So I'm playing on mobile. I'm playing there's a whole bunch of idle fighting games. There's like a Marvel one, and then there's one called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Legends. Again, because the boys are like that age, like I can have an auto battler on my phone, and you can like not really screw up the progress too much. And it's all superheroes they recognize, Ninja Turtles, stuff like that. So that's that. Console, I'm playing the Wolfenstein. The one from 2017, the I think it was a New Order, whatever it was. Anyway, the one with Nazis in America, because it always feels good to fight Nazis. And I'm playing a little bit of Cloudpunk. I've got a back catalog because I've when the boys were young, you don't spend a lot of time playing games. So like I feel like I'm playing catch up. Yeah. And then finally, like I'm also playing a whole bunch of like the mini games on LinkedIn, which is the most like grown up, boring adult thing ever. But they take like 30 seconds to a minute and a half to play. It's a new puzzle every day. And just like, so I came from like the Flash game world, like forever, like 15 years ago. And those kind of games, we would probably build and bundle like 30 or 40 levels into like a Flash game, put it on a website. And like, so that to me, it's just that like nostalgia, like web gaming type mold. And they're puzzles. I like puzzles. So yeah.
And it's good for your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about yourself so we could get to learn you a little bit more. But now let's get into the conversation, why we're here today. And folks, as I mentioned in the intro, we're here to talk about running an indie studio, but just beyond the first game. And it's really an important distinction and why I'm excited to dive in and talk about this. So to kick things off, Greg, running an indie studio long-term is definitely very different from just shipping a game, getting a game, getting out there, and then being what's next. So based on kind of that idea, right, what do you think most developers misunderstand about that difference?
So a lot of devs will tie the whole fate of the studio to that first single game. It's either a make or break moment, and just as optimistic as we want to be, and even if we do the due diligence, and even if you make the great game, sometimes it's not the right time to release it. Sometimes you can't find your audience despite your best efforts, and you wind up like losing a great team that can build a good project, can hit a milestone on time, but for various factors that are outside of your control, you wind up splitting everything apart. So one of the things that almost early on, as soon as you decide like, hey, we're going to be a studio, hey, we're going to be a team, is figure out like what 3 games do you want to make? What is your what type of game, what type of genre do you want to make? Are there systems that you can be building in game 1 that you can benefit and build off of in game 2? So for example, in #Blood, we had this like really robust dialogue system that handled all of our inventory, handled all of our dialogue, handled all of our mission states and stuff like that. And we were able to pretty much import that wholesale into Hank. And we got our Hank Shaw demo built and up and running in a matter of months, instead of trying to like start from scratch and build everything all together. So just everybody will suggest that you write smart reusable code. And when you think about that on a single project level, that makes sense because like you don't want to have extra bloat, you don't want to make extra calls. If you've got a method or a function that's going to like do something, just call that again and again. But think about that on a game to game basis. What inventory system can you build that you can use later on? Do you have I've got a scene loading system that goes into every game that we build, because like just no players want that feedback. Like one scene is going to load, and as you wait for the next scene, and I'm not going to write that from scratch every time. So have essentially like a suite of robust standalone element that you can feel like you're already 20 hours into building your game as soon as you decide what your next title is. Give yourself that leg up.
Yeah, I absolutely like that because like when you started addressing it right away, you called out to like, hey, there could be the situation where for whatever reason something doesn't work, you lose steam and everything kind of like comes down, and it's like, but we put everything, all our focus, attention, everything on this one thing, and then when you're thinking about what's next, there isn't anything because you are only just looking and focusing on that one thing. And it's not to say you need to focus on that one thing, but there was no plan or anything beyond that. And that's where the things start falling apart in a way. And there's a lot to be, said from that. The other thing that I like too is what you were calling out just a moment ago, is essentially like thinking in systems or processes and everything else. It's like, okay, yes, we're focused on this game, but what we're doing here is going to inform or help us learn the next project, how we do things, how we implement those things, like everything from templates to those, like you said, processes and codes and everything else. So that way you're not like trying to reinvent the wheel every time you're moving forward.
Right. In class, I often suggest that we loot the corpse, essentially. We've got the games industry has all these like really gritty, robust terms. Like, when you're playing a platformer and somebody falls off the edge of the world, you've got a kill floor where everybody dies and then you respawn the character. Or you've got blood gates where you've got to fight all the enemies before you move to the next section. And so like loot the corpse, I guess, is my addition to that really grotesque language. But essentially, you want to go back to your last project and cherry pick all the things that you can bring to the next one. And that's something that we talk about in class, where we start by building like a Pong game, and then our next project is an idle game, like an idle clicker game. And you're like, what crossover do these two things have? And you're like, there's art that you could possibly reuse between these games. There's the scene loading system that you can use between these games. There's buttons and interfaces, like anything that you structurally can build that'll save you even a week's worth of time or whatever, a day's worth of time, is definitely worth like going back to an old project and not to rewrite something just because you ought to or just because you have to. Like, we've got this sort of like dummy player mover code that we start as a base for every project, and often we'll rewrite it, but just getting the player moving on screen just help to achieve the goal and answer those preliminary questions that you're going to ask as you develop each additional project.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, especially that term that you came up with, loot the corpse. It does a lot of cool things. It just reminds of like, hey, look, you still are creating these resources and tools and everything else, but it also like kind of signals too that like, hey, look, even if you have to kill a project or it comes up, there is still good that comes out of it. And that's why I love that phrase so much, loot the corpse, because it signals like a bunch of different things going on there. And what you just shared really gets into some of the operational aspects of things, and to some degree, I'm sure it relates to the financial side of things too. So I want to kind of dive into those a little bit. A lot of indie studios, I would say, probably underestimate the operational side of things, right? So what would you say is kind of the biggest blind spots when it comes to actually running the business behind the games?
So it feels like a dream killer, but the first thing to really strongly consider is if you should quit your job or not. It is the goal. It is the goal to be so financially independent that you can quit your job and just make games full time. I fortunately have been in that position. where I could say like, listen, as I'm doing this games full time, that's what I'm doing. But there's also been other times where like I need to build the product nights and weekends. I need to put in that sweat equity in order for it to be a sustainable venture that I can not rely on outside sources or outside funding. Um, you you also need to like always be casting out. You always need to be like putting new irons in the fire to see if you can get additional contracts, get additional work, get additional promotional opportunities, because you are going to be in charge of making sure that your game gets in front of eyeballs, that your game gets involved in festivals, that you have an article written about the game, that all of your paperwork for Steam is in order, and then once you do become that full company, that you handle your yearly filing with the state, that you do any additional, are you filing as an LLC, or do you need to file the LLC as a C Corp, or as an S Corp, and what does that mean, and what are the deadlines for that? So make sure that before you decide to jump in with both feet, which is great because that'll give you loads of time to do it, make sure that you know what you're jumping into, and that you can swim a little bit, and if not, at least have some sort of like life preserver or something out there that you can just sort of hang on, until you're ready to swim again.
Yeah, really cool, important stuff that you called out there too, and a lot of us recognize this too. I'm sure is like, hey, if we go into this full time, that's a lot more time I can dedicate to this, and time is definitely an important factor. But when you're just starting out, like those other things, it's like when it comes down to finances, I mean, we all have to kind of like earn a living, right? And so we could support ourselves, our families, and things like that. And sometimes it might be frustrating because we can't go dive in, but being a little bit strategic. But like you said, it's like, make sure that there's essentially some overarching plan and an idea and concept behind this that maybe was somewhat validated a little bit more or whatever than just going off of a dream and hope, because that's where we find ourselves in positions where we don't have that life preserver, right?
Right. I've also seen folks leave like AAA and presume that like building an indie studio will run similar to like a AAA studio. And so if you can scale your not just your expectations, but scale your operational procedures to fit your new outlook. If you're just a one person operation, or if you're a 2-person team, like that's going to be way different than running a 500 person company. Like the when it comes down to like paying for software licenses, or buying new hardware, or like picking up TVs to go to conventions and trade shows and that kind of stuff. Like those are all different costs that you would make if you are that brand new fledgling indie studio versus established AAA thing that you might be used to, that you might have done for 8 or 10 years, and now are venturing out on your own.
Yeah, and there's so many other variables too. Like, what were you doing at AAA? Like, what kind of work? How much insight did you have to the full process, and how did it relate to marketing, to community, to development, and other things? So there's lots of things there that can be really, really hard and difficult lessons when you're like basically taking that all on without that infrastructure and support of a very large team, right?
Yeah, and all that time that you imagine being like, cool, I'm gonna have all this time to like focus on my discipline and my craft. You're exactly right. You're learning every new thing that you have to manage simultaneously, if you're starting your own studio, or even if it's a collaborative effort, you're taking a lot more of those operational experiences on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really good thing that I think gets into another area I'm curious about when it comes to like how indies and teams and such should think about kind of like the pacing of their projects and even the resources. And I think it's important because if they're not really thinking about these things, they could be constantly like potentially in this like cycle that leads to burnout or financial stress, right? Especially when they're doing so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thankfully, I've always relied on a mix of projects. And so I will to be able to take contract work from time to time to be like, cool, this contract is going to pay for like the base needs, food and for salary and for housing and other stuff like that. Yet I know that the time requirements are going to allow me to work on other project A or other project B. And so that's one thing that you've got to like look at and balance to be like, if we're working if we're working on work for hire stuff, does that allow time for the indie studio to thrive? Um, Also, are there other outlets that you could focus your indie studio on? When I started Tin Heart Interactive, we didn't make games. The first couple things that we did as Tin Heart Interactive was release sound assets on the Unity Asset Store, because that was like that's a wheelhouse I had. I could make audio recordings. I could work in the Unity engine. I could package that nicely and get it ready for developers and put it up that way. So ask yourself, like, do you need to be building a full game? Can you do work for hire stuff with another studio as you like develop your chops or as you develop your internal game? Can you be releasing assets to help that way? I also wound up on like um, a panel for Meta, because every once in a while they look for indie devs and stuff like that to like give feedback on various products they're working on. So just when you stick around in the industry long enough, you meet enough people, you get invited to like that other kind of stuff. So like that's a project that is super infrequent but pays kind of nicely, and so that allows me to pay for other things. I was designing a game for class. We were doing like a Pong game, just like balls and paddles and stuff like that. And there was a game jam that was running concurrently, and I built a game with that same like ball and paddle like scripts and everything like that, and made a couple $100 placing in that game jam. So a lot of it's like paying attention to the opportunity, and just being able to pivot, or to utilize the assets that you already have or already leveraged to your great advantage. So
Yeah.
I know that answer wasn't
No,
succinct, but
that's
I'm responsible for everything. Congratulations.
yes, exactly. But honestly, I like your response because I think it is a really great. It does a really good job at conveying at like this is how it is. This is like the real life of it. It's like okay, we're talking about one thing and going to another. That's exactly how it goes when you're managing these types of businesses and such. One thing I want to call it too is like there is that aspect of like okay, work for hire type stuff, or even if it's just small little things, right? But there's two things, and one that I think was kind of like almost like somewhat hidden in your response, which was, yes, we're talking about finances, right? Okay, we're bringing money in at least, but the other layer too, and this is where sometimes it can be helpful to kind of like, hey, how do I wait or determine what's the real opportunity here? Because it's not always about money. It's also about what is that strategic opportunity. And you even said yourself, by doing some of these things, it opened up opportunities to do some speaking, probably work with some other people or meet other people that could help you maybe get something else on the road. It's almost in a way its own form of networking. And which is really great because if you evaluate those things too, it's like, okay, I'm getting money in, but it's not just money. It could help me with my project. It could help me somewhere down the line, which goes back kind of our theme of like, how do we look ahead in what these things that we're doing now beyond that can benefit us beyond the first game.
Networking is never a dirty word. Everybody treats it like it is. Everybody treats it like it's this transactional value of like, oh, I need to get my hooks in people so later on I can get opportunities or things out of them. But like networking is just making friends in the industry. Like you all have this base level interest of games. You all have this base level interest of creativity. It's just keeping up with those people and seeing them at conventions and events, and then checking in with them and seeing what they're doing. It's just professional friendship is maybe a better word than networking.
Yeah.
I've been able to think about this in a way where all of the local developers in like the Baltimore region where I am, we go to like the IGDA events, or we'll go to different showcases or game jams and stuff like that. That becomes a sub list of contractors that I can look at hiring. We got a contract for a paid game jam, and I didn't have the bandwidth to do it all, and I was able to go to be like, hey, I know that you've done art. I've been in game jams with you. I've watched you do your art. Can you come do this project for a couple months? Can you come do programming for me for 2 months? Because I've seen your work. I know it's really good. I've always kind of wanted to work with you, and this is a great opportunity to like get everybody paid a little bit and to like just hang out and actually work professionally together. So just keeping abreast of what other people are doing and being involved in the local scene has been tremendously beneficial for me, for the studio, for other people. So that's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we're thinking about, long-term survival, right? How,
Mm.
how would you go about then balancing kind of that creative ambition that I know all of us have, and the reason why we're getting into this, this field, this industry? But how do you balance that ambition with the practical need for stability and obviously and ultimately revenue?
Um, well, a couple different ways. Number one, it took me a while, but I've learned to let ideas be small. And people have said it all the time of like, oh, narrow your scope and stuff like that. That's the way that they say it. But sometimes if you cultivate a good idea for a game, and you spend whatever 60 hours building that game, maybe stop at that point and ask yourself, like, is this it? Can this be it? Is it okay if this is a stopping point? And can we release it here? Instead of being like, oh, I want it to have 60 hours of playtime. What does it look like at 60 hours of dev time instead of 60 hours of playtime? What does it look like when you get that core concept down and working? Um, and so that's the first part of it, is to figure out like great to have big huge ambitions, but if you can convey the thought or the feeling or the fantasy of what that ambition was in a smaller window, that allows you to get to more things. We're only going to build a finite amount of games in our lives. We're only going to play a finite amount of games in our lives. Can we get to the point so we get to do the next one too? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is I've got a couple of long tail revenue pieces that have helped to help the studio sustain and survive and stuff like that. So I've done a couple of educational contracts where they're paid out like months later based on playtime, where it's used in schools and stuff like that. And it's not like a ton of money. It's not quit your job money, but it does cover like the filing fee for taxes and stuff like that. And so like, or it does cover like if I need to buy new television for a trade show, if I need to buy new controllers, like there's this like little trickle of income in different places based on long tail of games. And that's just a survivability thing. Like the more games you release, the more long tails you have. That's something I heard from like Double Fine like years back, is they have a whole catalog that continues to do well. And so you can't start a studio with several long tails. But if you can crack that code to figure out how to get a couple of those in place fairly quickly, that'll help you survive for quite a while.
Yeah, and what I like about that too is that's a strategy you could probably take and adapt in other areas and whatnot too. I mean, going back to what you said, like, selling stuff on the Unity Asset Store, for example, that could be another long tail. It could be something that's not even game related, even, right? If you're, I don't know, like there's any number of things like I'm not going to say any because I'm going to go off on a huge tangent. But right now, I'm thinking there's tons of different ways that you could go about doing those things, and it's another form of creativity, right? But one that has a very distinct purpose and intent to kind of like continue everything else going on. We started that last point about like creativity, right? And it was more about like, hey, how do we kind of control that ambition? But like, part of that too is like over time, we're going to start seeing that creative energy kind of like fade or maybe shift a bit, So from that perspective, how can people or studios kind of maintain that momentum and avoid kind of losing their identity or direction as it relates to their creativity?
So you should share your work in order to keep that I should say, in my experience, the more you share, the more energized you feel. Working with the team at Exit 73 Games, I have never felt more ready to work than after watching what somebody has shared in the Discord channel. If Chris does a little animation of a character or something like that and then sends it to us on Discord, like I am itching to get back to my machine and write or to work on a mini game or something like that. Or if Andrew sends like an executable, like a little playable part of the demo, like, man, I can't wait to play that. And then I can see all the possibility space where we put interactables, where we put collectibles, where we put all those things. And so if you've got a team that's able to like build off essentially like hype reasons, that's always super great to keep you interested and motivated. So that's the one part where you get your team involved and you build off of the stuff for the rest of your team. The other aspect is we do a lot of like trade shows or events or game showcases. We try to do one at least every 6 months, if not more often than that, because you are constantly getting it in front of new people, and that you can treat that as a milestone to be like, cool, we need to have the Too Many Games build ready for the end of June. We need to have the MagFest build by January. Actually, it's really like September because they have or very, very early applications. But you know what I mean? Like you have a milestone, you have a deadline, and you have a new audience that you want to share it with. And so they give you feedback on how the game's going. You get to pump some time in it. And the only time that really dips is like the couple days after the event where you're like exhausted. You just like got done like running your spiel several times in a row. And so but if you're always applying for new showcases and new events, like I said, at least every 6 months, if not more often than that, I found that to be a great motivator because it gives yourself a ticking clock deadline, and then you get that nice feedback cycle. Especially if they're live, like in-person events, people rarely give you bad news to your face, so it's really nice.
Yeah, and I think that what you just called out about in-person events too is a very interesting thing too, because I know logistically sometimes we look at in-person events, it's like, well, that's still a lot of money and resources, and what's the ROI and stuff. And yes, those are all important things to consider, but it's still about kind of balancing or understanding the difference between what those things are and what you need, right, to kind of feel yourself and everything. And sometimes those events, and I've been there firsthand, they are very motivating and exciting and everything else. Now, it doesn't mean maybe some people can't do it all the time, and maybe it's even a stretch to do one, but that's where it might come into kind of deeper stuff where you're really evaluating yourself and like, what do I really need and what's going to help me? And a lot of times that can be a thing. So that ROI is just represented in a different way.
Also, if financial cost is a barrier to entry to those things, then we should see if you can do a deeper dive to find ones that are within your price point. Because your local IGDA chapter might be hosting an event that is free for developers to sign up for. I know here in the Baltimore area, I think the Enoch Pratt Free Library has got an indie game showcase they do once a year. I don't think there's a sign up fee for developers for that. I've showcased at like Cecil College and other colleges and events and stuff like that, also without an entry fee or things like that. So when you picture it, you don't have to picture like a PAX style event where you're buying carpet
Right.
and you're buying like brand new stuff out of the like Razer controllers out of the box and everything like that. Like you can take a 32-inch TV and one laptop to a small showcase and still reap benefits from that. Without having to buy airfare and hotel and transport all your goods and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. There's always ways to approach it to still get like what that core thing is that you're looking to get out of that event.
Yeah. Also, sorry, can I just
go ahead.
hop on that? One last thing. If you grew up like playing in punk bands, or like if you've got that like punk ethos, like do it yourself, man. Find a brewery. No, seriously.
Yes.
Find a brewery. Get in touch with whoever's there and be like, listen, I know 4 indie devs. Can we come and set up and then get a whole bunch of alcoholics to show up and play our video games? Because like that's awesome. And odds are they might have the space for you. So like if the event isn't happening in your space, find a way to make it happen yourself, because you're going to see great rewards.
Yeah, I love that idea too, because it's like, again, this is like what, you could label it as that out of box thinking or whatever. And the way I look at it too, like from your example, Greg, is that, that's what is that? That's a venue where a lot of people are going to kind of unwind, are like, have just looking to have a good time. And how cool would it be if all of a sudden they show up to this watering hole they're used to visiting and frequent, and now it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? This is new. This is different. It makes the bar, the establishment, whatever, look like, hey, look, we're trying to mix things up so they look good. And then you're getting like feedback, and there's just a lot of different things that could happen. And that could be in various other capacities too. What if there's like a local, you're trying to get a kid's perspective or younger audiences on your game, because that's something you're reaching out to. That's consists of your audience for your game. Maybe there's a school program that can somewhat relate to that you could reach out to like the admin and connect you with the teacher who runs that program. Like, that is so much easier to do, and it's local and cost effective than just trying to think of all these other ways to go about it, especially if something like that doesn't exist. Like there's so many opportunities out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're talking a lot about kind of like this, like the longevity of things, right? So we're talking about the creative energy and everything, but let's look at things from a different perspective, because yes, like creativity and that passion is all important, but sometimes, you know, we realize that we adapt this role of a leader too, with running these studios. So, and that can impact everything from culture and everything else. So what would you say are some subtle team or leadership issues that can possibly slowly erode a studio if they're not addressed early on?
Ego is the hugest part of it. I've seen so many people have a strong creative vision, which is a boon early on. Like, I've got a strong creative vision for this game. I've got such an idea. I've already can play it in my head. That's great. That's how you know it's a good direction. That's how you know it's a good game. But the sort of no plan exists with after first contact. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, or whatever the patent phrase is. Yeah. So the idea is like, as soon as you share that game idea with the rest of your team, they are suddenly picturing a different game, and you're all working on like coalescing that into a single game, into a single experience. And if you are so rigid on that first idea that's in your head that you don't let the other people's creativity leak in and show and showcase and shine, then you're going to have a bad time building it. And really, the building it is kind of the fun part in a lot of ways, the creative problem solving. So allow yourself to say yes to other people's idea. Allow it to be a collaborative effort after you've done your initial pitch. We were working on #Blood, and I designed the dungeons. I really like level design. I did a lot of like dungeon master stuff for D&D, and to me, like, that's always stage one, is like you do it on graph paper, make it feel like a dungeon crawl. And so I enjoyed that process. Bob was one of our two artists, and he wound up drawing all the backgrounds and building things out. And Bob did all the level design for all of the sewer system. And I absolutely love it that Bob dove in and did all those level designs and made all those pathways and puzzles and secrets. And like, I didn't have any ego where it's like, oh, I'm level designer, I need to design every single place where a player can walk. I'm like, no, that's awesome. I'm glad that you've got the ambition for it. I'm glad you got the creativity for it. And I'm glad it's done. I'm glad that it's included in the game. And so try to figure out how to get enough ego where you can sell the idea and you can play the game in your head, and then immediately take it out behind the shed and shoot it in the head, and then allow you to work with your team, so that way you can get something creative that actually represents all of what your team can bring in their best possible light.
And I absolutely love that, because I know one of the things I've called out on here in the show in past conversations with guests is like, it's really important to be on the same page, but it's also can be very hard to do that. And especially in a smaller indie type environment where you have, you know, just a few other people that are on your team, essentially. Like, it can be, especially starting out, we don't always have all the skills to like articulate every detail and thing that we need to, because it's somewhat of an acquired and learning process. So in that moment, what is the best thing you can do? I love your answer to that, because it is so simple. It still can be complex, but the idea of it is just leave your ego behind, but more specifically, don't be so rigid on what you're doing, because what you think in your head is going to be very different than what someone else is trying to do. And unless you have a very defined process, which does take time to develop, where everybody is then completely on that same page, and it's never going to be perfect, then the only thing you have is what you just called out. Don't be so rigid. Be open to these other ideas. And plus, when I love the example you provided with your team member. If someone else is doing something, like maybe it wasn't 100% to your expectation. Right? I'm not implying that was the case in your situation, but maybe it's not 100% to your expectation. But you know what? 80% is better than you doing it 100%.
Right. And when you're in that small team setting, you quickly realize like if nobody does it, it's not getting shipped. It's not going in the
Nope.
game. So the
Exactly.
fact that somebody builds it means it's going in, and that's great. The fact that it survives into the lifeboat of what your game actually is and released. Um, and that's so huge is that players don't know. Players
Yep.
don't know what you anticipated. Players don't know how the code works underneath the hood. They might think that a random chance is really a random chance, but it's really like either a coin flip or a predetermined outcome with a spinning wheel on the front. But they it is all about the essentially like you're a magician, you're creating an illusion, and they don't know what to they only know the outcome, and they don't know what it took to get there. So let that be the let that be the product. Let the illusion be the product. Let the mystery and the intrigue all live there. But allow it to have mystery. That's the best way to build, I guess.
I love it. You know, I know we're coming on time here, so as we kind of start closing down and based off of what we were just talking about a moment ago, I'm curious, you know, if a small team really wants to stay healthy and collaborative, especially over multiple projects, right? What would you say are some good habits or structures they should prioritize from the start?
You try to figure out a place to get together. A lot of teams now are able to just work remotely, independently, you know, sort of in your bedroom coders. But figure out those moments where your team can get together to work and talk and just vibe, essentially. That's partially also why we like in-person shows. Our team is in Florida, New Jersey, Maryland, New York, and we have every 6 months we have a chance to see each other and hang out. And that's just even going to get dinner as a team is tremendously beneficial for all of us, for sanity reasons and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, figure out a way to hang out and not just have it only be about like Slack messages or other stuff from other people. Just remember they're all creative human folks that are working on something alongside you and they want it to be the best it can be. Nobody ever tries to make a bad game. Everybody's always trying to make the best game they can. Internalize that and know that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, because it's like, you know, still, even this day and age, there's everything's accessible, right? But that connection with others still has a lot of significant weight to it, that we might not always identify until after we had those moments.
Yep.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, Greg. But before we close, you know, we discussed a lot and everything. What are a few things that you would call out based on our conversation today?
Okay. Number one, make sure that you're ready to go full time if you're going to go full time. There's no shame in building your studio nights and weekends. And sometimes that's even the smart and sensible way to go. You can start by like building something on the side and even taking it to some showcases. You might feel guilty where you're like, oh, I'm not a real developer, or I'm sort of hiding this from my other thing of like, don't. This is one aspect that you're working on. Feel proud about the game you're building, and realize that like even if you're not devoting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on this project, it's not that you're not making it. You are still valid. You're still the game developer. You're still making progress. Only go full time when it makes financial sense. Don't ruin yourself over a dream, but keep the dream alive. That's number one. Number two, have a strong creative vision. Share that with your team, and then get rid of the ego and allow others to add their best selves to the game. Gaming is a collaborative, creative endeavor. Even if you're like a solo dev, but you've got a couple of contractors, they might do things that's slightly different, that has a whole new, fun, great spin that might inspire you to do something different, or that just enriches the world that you're building in great ways. And try to get more sleep, brush your teeth, eat healthy.
Stay
There you
healthy.
go.
Take care of yourself.
There you go.
Awesome. Love it. Such great things. Well, Greg, I really appreciate our time here together and, you know, sharing your insights and everything. You know, if people want to reach out to you, connect, learn more about Tin Heart Interactive, Exit 73, or your upcoming game, Hank Shaw Animal Investigator, where can they do that? Please drop us some links.
Sure, yeah. Exit 73 is very active on any of the visual platforms. So Exit 73 Games is on TikTok, Exit 73 Studios on YouTube, and on Instagram, stuff like that. Tin Heart Interactive is on Itch. We've got a handful of small games there. And Hashtag Blood is currently on Steam. And Hank Shaw Animal Investigator is probably going to be announced on Steam by the time this goes live. So you can maybe go wishlist it. That'd be stellar.
Awesome. Really appreciate all that. And again, those places, or the main ones at least, are going to be on, the show notes. If for whatever reason we don't have like Hank Shaw up there, because of the timing of everything, I'm sure you'll be able to get there no problem by going to the other links, such as tinheartinteractive.com. Greg, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing everything that you were able to.
Absolutely, Andrew. Thank you so much. This was great. I had lots of fun.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.